All right, so we are in week 14, day 3. Am I sharing my screen still? Yes. Okay. So this week we've been going into some CRUD operations with our Django REST framework, and up until this point, anybody, using Postman to go to our endpoint can make a request and return a response. Just anybody and their mama can come and make this request. In the real world, we don't want this to happen. So we're going to, as the README for today says, that kind of hippie nonsense ends today. We're going to learn how to authenticate users and ensure that only users we give access to are authorized to, an authorization to, are allowed to make these requests to our API endpoints. So we're going to do this using our Wine API, which we worked on just a bit ago, getting up and running, hopefully. If not, you can use any other Django project. It'll be about the same steps that we're going to be doing to add authentication to this project. Okay, so first, Django REST Framework actually comes with several authentication solutions already baked in. We're going to use just a simple token authentication. And I'm going to show you first, we have a guide here. You can click on the authentication solutions link in our README today, and it will bring up our Django REST Framework API guide authentication. So these are, you can read through this and figure out what type of authentications you might look into using. There's also some third-party packages. We are just going to use a simple baked-in solution that is easy to access and manage. How we're going to do that, let's see, this is a typical flow of how we're going to do this token authentication. So here we have on one side is the user, and on the other side is our API in our backend. The user is going to send a username and password to sign up to the API. When they do that, the API is going to create this new user with a token that's unique to them. The API doesn't return that right away. All it does simply when you sign up is just creates this user and a token. So now the user needs to send their username and password, like if you're signing into a website, to look up, to send it to the API, which will then look up our token, because we need to request this token from it in order to, let's see, the API sends us our token back. Then we're going to use this token that it sends back for all the further API requests. When we send that with the API requests, the API is going to look at that token, see if there's a user associated with it, check the validity of it, and then finally send the response back. So it's a roundabout way to access this API information, but more secure. We're going to sign up, get a token back, use that token to access a website or the API endpoint, and then they're going to return back the response to us. Okay. So first part of that process that we saw was we need to create a user. Right now, we don't have anything in our API that deals with users. We have wines, and that's about it. So first thing we're going to do is, looks like we're going to add some boilerplate just to make sure we can use authentication in our project. So to do that, we're going to go within our project, which is wines, and come to our settings. This is where we have all of our information for our project. We want to add, in the README, we can see there is a REST framework default permission classes and default authentication classes. And we're just going to throw that. You can scroll through here and try to find it, but it's not something that's automatically included here. So we're going to scroll all the way. We have some like auth password validators, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're going to throw that just on the bottom of our settings file. So for our REST framework, basically all this is saying is that everything's going to be protected by default. So our default permission class is we want our users to be authenticated. Are they authenticated? So everything's going to be protected by default. You can look into the documentation to kind of figure out different ways to approach this. The README says you can do either protect everything like this and unprotect as needed, or you can also do the opposite and have everything unprotected and protect where you want to. But we're going to start off with just everything's locked down. You need to register, at least register for our website to be able to access any of our data. And the second part is we are using a token authentication for this authentication method. And we kind of discussed how that goes. We're going to get a token that we send with every API request in order to access this API. So the next thing we also need to do is we need to ensure that in our installed apps, let's see up here, we're going to be using a, let's see, REST framework. Auth token. So that is the app we are going to be using for our authentications. Just make sure we can use it. All right, so that is all you need to make sure you can use Django authentication, at least for this with our token authentication. We need to establish our permissions and then add this to our settings and our installed apps. So now we're back at that square one. We need a way to make a user. So we don't want to create an endpoint to make a user in our Wine API. That doesn't make sense, because we want to have everything separated in our object-oriented programming thought. So we are going to go ahead and just create a new app that's called accounts, just to hold all of these user accounts within them. So we'll do our Python manage.py, start app, and we're going to make one called accounts. So the great thing about Django is that normally I would have to come in here and create a model, like a user model with name, username, email, whatever else we want. But Django already comes in with a built-in user model. So
What?
things...
Sorry.
Oh, I thought you were asking a question.
No, I just wasn't on mute.
Okay. So we're going to keep it easy and just use that default user model. As you get used to authentication and kind of working with users with the user model, you can overwrite this user model with your own custom user model. But I would hold off on that until you get a handle for how to send the token authentication back and forth, because that could start getting a little convoluted. So we're going to use Django's user model. So I don't have to make anything here. It's already there behind the scenes. But we are going to need to have a view, since this is going to be, and we're going to have some endpoints. The first thing we want to do, like we said, is we want to create a user. So for this endpoint, copy and paste from our README. It always complains, but it works. I don't know why it does that. We're going to have a sign up view. So this is where we're going to do our, basically create our user. It says we're using a little bit of Django REST framework magic here. So the first thing to notice is that in order to do this, we have to relax permissions on this resource. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to create a user without being a user first and sending that token in, but we haven't even gotten a token yet. So how can we create a user? So this is where we relax our permissions and just allow everybody that will hit this endpoint will be able to go ahead and use this sign up view. So then we can say, let's see, here we do a perform create. If the serializer is valid, we're going to take, we have a username and a password. And here, since this is a special model, mostly because of this password field, we can't just do a simple create. We have to use the special create user method, which if you wanted to, and see, we're calling that from this user model, which is default in Django, or built in, sorry, to Django. If you wanted to see more about how this create user works, of course, you can control click on it and come see, you know, all the behind the scenes, how Django is handling this and how they're using these methods. But all you need to know is in order to create the user, you have to do a create underscore user, username equals username, password equals password. There are additional fields you can use, extra fields, that will just come with time and digging in and learning what those extra fields you want to supply are. But start off easy. Start off with just username, password, and that's it. Okay. So we also have our serializer class. I believe we've covered serializers. We were previously putting them within the view itself and or using default serializers, but now we're actually going to have a separate file for our serializers just to kind of help keep everything in their own little world. So here we'll have our serializers Python file. And this is just so that we can handle the data correctly. So we're always going to be we're going to have a username and password. This is just how we want to convert it from our database to JSON and back again. So we do it manually, but Django REST Framework gives us a very concise way to do this with this built-in solution. So this is what it wants. This is what you'll put in your serializer in order for this specific built-in authentication to work. All right, so we have our view, which is our endpoint. We have our serializer that we have done here. Let me save it, make sure, yep, it's being pulled in here. And now we want to make that endpoint for us to hit to be able to sign up and create a user. So let's make our URLs file here. And we are going to, again, just all the typical things up top, you're just going to pretty much copy and paste every time for these. We're going to import our view as well. Here we can see our URLs. We have a get token, and this uses this obtain auth token. This is just, this handles giving us a token so that we can use this without having to make one ourselves. This is, again, another built-in with the Django authentication. So anytime somebody goes to this get token, remember our cycle, we said we sign up, we get the token back, we sign up, and then we send our username and password, the API responds with a token, and then we send that with all future requests. So our logical step would be to hit our sign up path first, which we've established how it creates a user with a username and password. And then after we sign up, we immediately need to get our token. So we'll hit the get token next, which will then, if we send it our username and password, and we are indeed in our database as a user, then this get token will send us back an authorization token. Or sorry, authentication token. I think they can be used hand in hand. So that's how these two paths work. Sign up would typically happen first, get token would happen second. I'm going to save that now that we've added URLs to our accounts. And again, anybody stop me and ask questions if you have questions along the way. But a lot of this is just, this is how you do it because this is how Django documentation said this is how we do our authentication and this is what you have to put in your files. So now that we've got these URLs, of course, we have to go back to our project here under wines and make sure that it's included in the overall URL patterns. So we're going to add a path to accounts. There we go. which is including all of our account URLs. So we will have a /accounts/ whatever we have at the end here. Okay, so that is it for actually adding authentication to our application. Make sure to save everything. And since we added a new view and all this stuff and a user account, even though the model's built in, we still need to run our migrations because we haven't quite added it to our database yet. So make sure when you get this all up and running, everything's in there. I guess it's not enough. We're going to make migrations. And I think I already did this earlier. I can't remember. And migrate. So it looks like I already put everything in earlier today. And actually, I think it happened automatically because I used the create super user and it made me an account already, which we'll see in a second. Okay, so now we can test this and make sure our authentication is working as expected. So we're going to come back here. We see I hit this before. And well, first let me look at the state of my server. I want to make sure it's still, okay, everything's still running and it's happy. So I'm going to come back to Postman here. Does everybody have Postman or some sort of endpoint tester? Okay, so you can come in and do your GET requests to wines or even, a specific one if your database is populated. Now I expect it not to let me pull this up because I have not, with this request, this GET request, nowhere am I sending it anything. Oh, except for there. We're going to go back to no auth. So this should not return anything, hopefully. We'll see. Yep. Oh, no. Authentication credentials were not provided. So how do we do this then? Does anybody remember the steps on how I can access this? What is the first step in this whole authentication process?
You gotta hit that sign up endpoint.
Yes, we have to hit that sign up endpoint. So I'm going to open a new request here and it's going to be a post because with this sign up, we have to send it a username and password because that's how we sign up. We're giving it information. So we need to make a post request to our not wines. That URL was accounts/sign up. Okay, so now when we make a post request, we need to always send something in the body. It's always expecting something. I'm going to use form data because it's easier for me to keep it separate. So in our form, we're going to be giving it a username and a password. And this is basically when I go to a website and I click sign up and I'm filling in the form, this is what you're doing. And when you click post, it's sending the information back to the API. So we're going to make test and I'm going to name this password. So now I'm going to send this to sign up, which should hit that view to create a user called test and give it that password. But we can see I already did that earlier. The user with that password already exists. So cool, I'm already signed up. So that's good. If you sign up now with a new thing, you should have like a success response. Let's do test 2, password 2, and send that. Okay, so it will send back that was received and it's set up. So now I have a user. I have 2 users. I have test and test 2. What is the next step after I signed up? What do I have to do now? Somebody besides Sean.
Oh,
Get
good,
a
because I don't
token.
know.
Sorry, what was that, Danielle?
Get a token.
Yes, we need to get our token because now, like we saw earlier, this website, this endpoint expects me to give it something in order for me to get a response back. But how do I don't have a token yet. So that is where the other endpoint came into play, which is going to be another post request. Seems weird. You're asking for a token, but in order to get that token, you have to give it your username and password. So it's a post request. Anytime you're giving information to an API, it's going to be either a post or a put or something like that. So for this post request, we're going to go to accounts, but we're not going to sign up this time. This time we're going to, is it get underscore token? I guess I could go look at the URLs, get dash token. I'm going to make triple check here. Yes, okay, so that path is get slash dash token. So I'm going to go there to get my token. However, it's a post request and it expects some stuff. It expects my username and my password. So I signed up as test and test2. I'm going to try to get test token here and give it my username and my password. So now when I send this post request, it returns a token. And I'm going to send test2 and we're going to see it's unique to each user. So I'm going to send test2. Unable to log in.
Password
Oh.
too.
Thank you. Okay, yep, another different token. Everything's unique. Awesome. So each of these users have their own tokens. That token stays the same every time. I can send multiple GET requests for the token, and it's going to be the same thing every time I send that or start post requests to get that token back. So let's continue on with just test, just because. All right, so here's my token. So I signed up, which I established my username and password. I sent my username and password to the API and said, hey, I'm a valid user. Can I have a token? And the API checked and said, yes, you are a valid user. Here is your token. What can I do now with this token? How about Hamilton? Are you there?
I'm here.
All right, so what is the last step after I have my token? What can I do with this now?
I'm not sure actually.
Okay, so this whole process, we're adding authentication to our API, right? So we signed up as a user. Why, like, what's even the point of having this token? Why am I signing up with a username and password? What's the end
You
goal
can
here?
actually access the data now.
Yeah,
Yes.
we gotta send our token with our request now, right?
Correct. Yep. So let's go back to this GET request that we did earlier. Said that I didn't give it any authentication credentials because we blocked it down. So it returned a nice 401 unauthorized. It expects us to pass correct authentication credentials. So how can I do that here? So it tells us in the documentation, it will tell you a very specific way on how to pass that authorization to this API endpoint. Postman has built in here this authorization tab. So we're going to come over to here. It's usually set to no authentication, or sorry, no authorization. This API, Django API, the built-in I can't say it, authentication with it expects, it looks like it says an authorization header, and it starts with the word token followed by a space followed by the actual token. So you'll see that in the documentation. In Postman, we come to authorization, and you have a lot of options here when you drop down. I assumed it would be bearer token because I just plugged in a token, but I still didn't work. Apparently, in the new Postman, what you actually want to use for Django's authentication is this OAuth 2.0. And we are going to add it to our request headers that we're sending back to the API. And we want the prefix that comes in before our token to be the word token. Because Django expects us when we're sending this authentication, this authorization back to the API, it expects it to look like token and then our, random thing of letters. So it would say authorization is the key and the value is token, comma, whatever, or token space, whatever. So here, this prefix, we're doing that here. And then, let's see, token name. I don't think, where do I put? I think I just put it in token name. No, where is it? Let's find it. Let me look at my notes because I've forgotten now since I pulled it up. Hey, where is it? No, we're not. Why isn't it right? Okay, we have a problem. Is it Auth2? It is Auth2. There should be a thing right here that lets me put in the token value. I don't know why it's not there. Well, let me try a new. Well, that's not cool. Does somebody else have this up and does theirs have it? Space?
Yeah, mine has it.
Cool. Yeah, because that's my screenshot I put earlier. My screenshot earlier has it in there. An easy place for you to just shove the token in. Let's see. I don't want to save that. Let's go back. Maybe it's because, no. Let's try sending it and see what happens. Well, it worked. I don't know where it got the token from. Maybe because I entered it earlier and it just remembered. I'm really confused. I don't use Postman much. I use something else. But you should be, yes, you should have a token and then your header prefix, you'll put in token, and then you should be able to plug in what this value here, this token, in with your GET request. And we can see now it gave us the information. So let's do that. We're going to make another GET to lines1, and we're going to send that token, and we can see still working. That's awesome. But that is it. That's pretty much all we had for today. Any questions on how we're using, well, maybe not how we're using the default user model, but any questions on how to inject it into your program, into your project? No questions? All right. And again, I think the hardest part is just remembering that flow of how to actually get that token and use it in your requests, and remembering that it's a post to sign up, a post request to sign up. It's a post request to get your token. And then you use that token to make any GET request or post request or whatever after that. Okay. Yep, I'll stop the recording here now. And we'll go over the challenge.